A very good evening to our viewers. Thank you for joining us tonight on the agenda. My name is Toivo Jabela. Tonight on the platform, we are welcoming back Professor Job Amupanda. He is the leader and activist-in-chief of the Affirmative Repositioning movement, which is contesting for the first time in the Presidential and National Assembly election in November. And Professor Amupanda, of course, is the presidential candidate of the movement, which also last weekend launched its manifesto, which they are calling a plan for Namibia. And Professor Amupanda is here to help us ventilate that document and see what the plan for Namibia is for the movement. Thank you, Professor, for making time. The launch of your manifesto took place in Zambezi region, a very interesting choice of venue. Why Zambezi?
Yeah, firstly, if you understand the DNA of the AR movement, you will see that we don't agree with the political system that is in our country now. We seek to change it. We seek to turn the tables so that who was God becomes dog and who was dog becomes God. So we also don't agree with the terminology that is being used. It seems that everyone has been given a syllabus to follow. All these political parties use even the terminology that is there to launch. Journalists ask you, when are you launching your manifesto? But who says that we are launching? Who says we're not just pressing the button and send it to whoever it is that needs to be able to read it? So we don't agree with that approach. So when we sent out our invitation, we didn't say it's a launch, we said we are unveiling. So what we went to do in the Zambesi is to unveil the AR plan for Namibia. So we don't want to be subjected to SWAPO terminology, SWAPO way of doing things. And that's why we are extremely opposed to bringing people from South Africa, distributing of food as a basis of Namibians to take their decision on that basis. So Zambezi is quite very special for us because we think that there's a dismal failure of government as far as that region is concerned. There has been a conflict in the Zambezi region, and we've written a paper about that there's been a post-conflict deficit. Yeah, so in war study and peace studies, there's what is called, after the conflict has erupted, you go to make peace. It's called peacemaking. So after you've made the peace, so in other words, you have separated the warring people, you then come and keep the peace, which is another process of peacekeeping. So you need to, after you have made the peace, you need to keep the peace. That's why you go and intervene. But while you are in the process of keeping the peace, you need to do what is called peace building, in other words, post-conflict transformation. That society has never transformed. The very sentiments are still there. So we think that we represent that vision, trying to deal with the core sentiments that people have had in that specific area. So it's quite very interesting. We think that society, there's a lot of things. So it resonates with most of the things that we want to do. For instance, I speak Oshindonga at home, and at school, at Omarala Primary School, I would go and the teacher would teach me. In Oshindonga, I would go to the library and I would find a novel written in Oshindonga. I would go to university, it's Oshindonga, like that. It's not the same in the Zambezi region, regardless of where you're from. You speak Sifwe at home, you go to school, no one is teaching you Sifwe. You speak Suvia, you go to school, no one is teaching you Suvia. And you start wondering, what type of society are we living in? There is no books that are written in Suvia. There's no books, but those languages are there. And there are many dynamics like that, you know. I was at one of the lodges, the previous visits, so I go to Zambezi a lot of times, announced and unannounced. So one time when I was sitting at that lodge, I could see the small boats that are coming from Zambia. Then I asked, what are those boats bringing? And I said, no, they're bringing tomatoes. I could actually see the tomatoes production on the other side in Zambia. And these people cross over to bring the tomatoes this side. And it's a big scandal. So Zambezi represents a failure of imagination as far as leadership is concerned. It represents a people that have been neglected. There was a place called Katima Farm. So Katima, just on the way to Wenela border post. So in Katima Farm, the infrastructure is already, the pipes are underground and everything. But it's a farm with all infrastructure. You simply just need to switch on the water and do the planting and things, but it's never worked for maybe 20, 30 years. So Zambezi represents that very area where we could do something. It could be in terms of agriculture, it could be in terms of human relations. I went to those informal settlements and I see young people, then some of them came to me and said, no, Job, I can tell you because you are young, I can relate with you. So I do drugs, I'm always drunk, and sometimes I go and steal. It's because I cannot, there's nothing that I can do. And it's a terrible thing. So it touches our hearts as activists, and we feel that let's go to those communities that need us the most. Not that other communities don't need us the most, but Zambesi is very special for us, and we think that with the right leadership, we are able to turn those tragedies into opportunities for progress, which was also our guiding theme while we were there, when we were unveiling our plan for Namibia. So our plan operated at a strategic level, and it coincided with specific interventions that we wanted to do in the Zambezi region, for instance. We received about 10 hectares of land where we intend to build a soccer pitch in a short term, for the long term to also build a fully fledged stadium.
Is that if we elected him?
No, absolutely. Remember that we are a radical movement, a revolutionary force of the left. We have just obtained a license to practice and operate in politics. And so we remain that. The certificate that we got in June didn't change our content and character. So we were already scheduled to be in the Zambezi to get this, to study this land. In fact, we wanted to take the excavators and the bulldozers there to Kongola. Kongola is an area where you had this 100 million crocodile farm that the government has abandoned. So we're visiting those two areas. So we thought that while we are there already doing community work and being able to do that, so let's do something about it. So we're very excited. Colleagues from NFA, for instance, they said, oh, this is a wonderful initiative. They are willing to assist us with the technical, this is what the SG, the Secretary General of NFA, Mr. Siaoya, they indicated that, oh, NFA is willing to provide the technical assistance. So we told the traditional leadership there and the youth and the community that we are going to do this. We are quite very serious with it. Whether we get elected or not, of course, we hope that we get elected so that we can accelerate. Yeah. And I think it's going to be a beautiful stadium at Kongola, you know, to have a stadium that is closer to the river and to nature. And, you know, imagine the brave warriors playing in Kongola and some of those. So all those factors, because of historical deficit, the socio-economic deficit, the failure of the leadership to be able to build a cohesive society in the Zambezi, those are one of the decisions that we decided. Let's go there to that community that needs us the most, although all other communities need us, to be able to share with them our vision for the future, our vision for the country, our vision for the region, but also to do things that we're already doing now instead of waiting to be elected. Of course, we can do better once we are elected, but election is one day event. Although people have all these theatrics of rallies and what, election to us is not a factor. It obviously gives us an opportunity to transform our society and lead our country better. Yeah. But Zambezi is quite very special for us. Yeah.
Let's talk about the document itself. I want to delve more into first into the economic and development agenda of the country, because I believe that the policy position of the government, any government that leads a country in the modern times, is very important. When you talk about the creation of a capable development state, what can you tell us about how you intend to tackle that aspect?
So the developmental state, we're talking about changing the character of the state. When you look at an individual, there's a way how the individual handles things. This person is quick to anger, this person is short-tempered, this person is very analytical. So there are those characters and characteristics that are inherent to an individual, and that informs their decisions that they take. The state is the same. The character of the state informs the type of decision that people make. So regardless of who you have as a president, regardless of who you have as a minister, there are certain things that are just determined. If you have a machine, if you have a V8 machine, the V8 machine informs the capacity of the car. I'm building up a F100 and I'm putting a Lexus V8 engine in there because The Lexus V8 engine can perform certain things. And because of the weak leadership, particularly at the intellectual level, and their inability to conceptualize what type of state we have, you now have a donkey Botswana that wants to do the work of a V8 engine. So we want to change the character of the state to give it a proper engine to be able to do that. And what is that engine? Is a developmental state. Now, what is a developmental state? A developmental state is a state in which the leadership, the political leadership, have an ideological hegemony as far as economic growth and industrialization is concerned. So you have a president and a government that says that our priority is industrialization. Yeah, that's one of the characteristics. So the leadership have an ideological hegemony. So you are concerned not necessarily about boyfriend and men, whether you don't have a woman or what, all those other things. You are concerned about economic development. You are concerned about priority areas. You are defining the path for industrialization. That's the first characteristic. The second characteristic is what is called meritocracy. The person who gets a job, the person who gets appointed is not because of geography of your birth. It is the men and women with talent and energy and the necessary skills and fortitude to be able to take our country forward. So in all those countries that have developed that are called developmental state, a capable developmental state, the jobs are given to capable people. So in other words, meritocracy. The developmental state, it's also having what is called corporatism. So you bring together all the economic players, you bring together the union and ask them, what do you want? You bring together businesses, what do you want? These guys probably say, no, we want salaries that are above inflation and we want productivity and things like that. So you agree to a pact that is called corporatism. So what we want to do is to make sure that Namibia is a capable developmental state. Now, so it must have that V8 engine. Currently, we have a 16-valve engine. It's not even no longer a hetatu. You know those TAS thing that we have. That's the type of engine that our country has. We want our country to have a V8 engine to be able to pull the necessary weight that requires. But the state is capable in terms of the people that are also positioned there. That's why we are taken to the cleaners. That's why we are unable to articulate anything. That's why we are buying 24% of our own resources in this green hydrogen thing, because we don't have a capable developmental state. So the state is not clear, the president is not clear, ministers are not clear in terms of what is it that they wanted to do, because the character, content and character of the state. Okay. That's what we mean by a capable developmental state.
Yeah. Just before I move to the next topic on your thing here, let's talk about your ideological posture as a political party, because of course you're on the left, and you have been agitating for the longest of times about some sort of socialist approach to things. Is that still your posture? Is that what you intend to do with the country if given power? And in practical terms, it would mean what?
Well, you have two extremes. The most extreme is capitalism. Every man for himself and God for the rest of us. And the other extreme on the left, you have communism, where everything belongs to the state. We don't believe that the individual must be on their own. We also don't believe that the state must own everything. So what we do, we try to, of course, we locate ourselves on the left, at the center here. Capitalism on the extreme right, communism on the extreme left. So we are a force of the left. So we actually believe that the state must have a central role to play in the economy. The question of ideological posturing and positioning is just that sometimes people don't explain it. It has to do with this. What is the role of the state? What determines capitalism and communism is not the tie that you are wearing that is red, or a red star that you are wearing. No, it's what is the role and position of the state in the economic life of our people. So we actually believe that even on the left, there is a role of the private sector, but there is also a role of the state. So we believe that the state must play a meaningful, constructive role in terms of the economy. Why? Because we are at the primitive stage of development. Yeah. So you can say the private sector. I mean, in Namibia, if you ask how many billionaires are here, they will not even fit in the toilet. Yeah. They will not even. They will not even fill up a toilet. The so-called billionaires. So our private sector is very small. Yeah. So there will come a time where the state will have to retreat. But unfortunately, the state have to direct priority because of the primitive stage of development that we're concerned. Of course, we remain a revolutionary force of the left, and you will see in terms of our constitution, we say AR movement is a Marxist, Fanonian, and Sankarist leftist movement, those combination. So we use Marxist tools of analysis, right? But Marxism presupposes universality. We disagree at that level to say, no, you can't just say class dynamics, because for a colonized people, it's not just about class dynamics between the rich and the poor. It so happens that in the colonization of a special kind that has occurred on the African continent, the poor happens to be black, and the rich happens to be white. That's what those lenses are not in Marxism. That's why we use Fanonian conceptualization to be able to actually understand that, yes, we accept the basic assumption of Marxism, but we need to actually sanitize it with Fanonian thinking, which is a thinking of the colonized people in terms of what has been the consequences of colonialism. But we don't end it, and we also go to Sankara. Yeah, in terms of a revolutionary posture, you don't just need to theorize, you need to go out there and do the practical. So of course we remain a revolutionary force of the left. We believe that the state, at the primitive state of development where we are, or a primary state of development where we are, you cannot succeed without the state. The apartheid state did not, the Afrikaners did not get here because of themselves. The Afrikaners were poor and uneducated at one point, to an extent that white people actually felt that Afrikaners are such a shame to the white race. The Carnegie Foundation in the United States even sponsored what is called the Carnegie Study, to study and see what is the solution to this problem of Arambur. That's why the study came out and said, no, we need to give them land in Southwest Africa, in our country. So the people who got farms during the Union of South Africa between 1920 and 1930s were poor and uneducated Afrikaners. So after the Anglo-Boer War, Afrikaners pulled them together through what is called the Hep Mekar movement. And they started donating. That's how Santam was established. That's why Sanlam was established. That's why AFBOB was established. Yeah, because sometimes people say, I have AFBOB. But if you ask them, what does AFBOB mean? It means Afrikaanse for what, all those other things there. That's how APSA was established. But of course, the National Party, through the Broeder Bond and others, so the state was still able to do all those things. Those houses in Katutura were built by the apartheid state. That's why you need to actually ask yourself, excluding the brutality that black people suffered, apartheid was actually a very successful developmental state in terms of all those indicators. It was building houses. It was providing. I mean, if you are a young man, you get married, you are 25 and above, you can get free slaves from Swanla. That institution, I think, is Landbo also, what eventually became agriculture, I think, Agribank. Those institutions, they could provide funding, you can get free slaves, and you can get resettled. So for them to achieve their objectives, a capable developmental state was quite very instrumental in terms of being able to assist our people. So we won't be able to succeed as people of Namibia with a weak state. We won't be able to succeed without the state that is actively involved in determining priority areas. And by industrialization, I don't mean tenders. That's not. Economies never developed by tenders. Economies have developed by building real industry. When we are talking about real industry, you are talking about a person, and that's what you also find in our plan for Namibia, a person who's sitting back and say, we import 80% of our product from South Africa. Yeah, so we are economically dependent on this country. We are energy insecure. We get our electricity from Eskom in Zambia. So why is it that we never had load shedding? It's because with electricity, just a plug there that is written Namibia. So during the load shedding, people just said, no, keep on that plug. If somebody just removed it, we would have had load shedding, because we're one of the most energy secure nation on the face of the earth.
Insecure.
Yeah, insecure on the face of the earth. So when you look at that, we're also talking about a developmental state would do what is called import industrialization plan, import substitution industrialization. So you say that 80% of our product that we are getting from South Africa, how do we replace that? So in other words, you purposefully say, and you will find it in our document, we purposefully say that, okay, the food tender is 3 billion, okay? Now, before you even go out and tender, because this government, they just award the tender, they give it to Toivo. They don't care where Toivo is getting the tomatoes from. They just say, we are going to give you this lot to supply eggs. A government that is giving you a tender doesn't care where you're getting it from. These guys that are doing this tendering, they say, no, we have to get this thing from South Africa. I get a tender, I fly to South Africa, negotiate with these whites. They already have the infrastructure. They already have the trucks to come and deliver the things there. So import substitution industrialization would mean then you say, okay, I'm giving you a tender for 3 billion. Okay, here is a 3 billion tender that you are getting Toivo. Now Toivo, as a condition, if we are the capable developmental state, we want you to get your cabbages from Simon. Okay, Simon, you must have a uptake agreement. Go and get the land, DBN will fund you so that you can supply Toivo. So this guy, when he's doing the production, is already guaranteed because Toivo have gotten the tender. Now what this government does, Simon doesn't exist. They just give a tender to Toivo, and Toivo goes and source the food wherever it is. So import substitution industrialization would mean Toivo is forced by law and by government policy to get his cabbages from Simon. And Simon will be funded by DBN because of an uptake agreement that have already signed with this other one. So that thing can only be facilitated by a capable developmental state. So in other words, there is a correlation between budgeting and execution of the budget. So in other words, when Shimi drafts the budget, he doesn't just draft the budget and give a beautiful speech and get people from his village as part of Ipumbu Shimi soccer team. And after that, he goes to procurement board. Procurement board just award. They don't even care whether the person is executing. They just say our role is to award the project, and they have this term that is called project owner. So a person doesn't deliver, procurement board is not concerned. The guys that are doing the budget is not concerned. The so-called project owner is the ministry. So we ought to be able to say that this budget, already at the level of budgeting, you ought to be able to say that this budget is aimed at providing this number of jobs. So when you hand it over to procurement, you say, you are doing your procurement in your assessment criteria, you must ask whether people meet this employment target. So the unemployment problem that we also have in our country is because of a mismatch between economic planning and economic management. They don't use budget and procurement as tools of economic growth, for instance. So those are the achievements that you get as a developmental state. That's also what we mean that the state must have a fundamental role to play in the economy.
Before we go on a short break, Professor, let's talk about, you're talking about reforming SOEs. Did I see something like that here? Yeah. What is the plan there? Because SOEs, for me, I'm asking because they have, you have these contradictions. People, for example, talking about, I'm one of the people who are not complaining about the closure of Namibia, and I know that you are actually on the other side of the spectrum because you believe that the institution should have been kept. I think I've read some opinion of yours to that extent. And I'm saying that if the entity is non-performing and we are throwing billions of money into it, is it for sentimentalism? Is it just because it has a flag of Namibia? What are the actual benefits?
Absolutely not, because we're not defending incompetence. We are not defending chronism. We try to separate the failure of the institution to the essence of the institution. Yeah, so we are very clear about that. So we might agree with you in terms of the weaknesses of the institution, but we don't agree that we must do away with it because of those things. It's the same way that the parents doesn't disown their child because if a serial killer is killed today, if some guy there is a serial killer, the police pursue him and was shooting back at the police and he's killed. He's a rapist, he did all those things. Is that guy not going to be buried? Somebody is going to read the eulogy of that guy. Somebody is going to come and pick up the body because the person is a human being regardless of what they did. So we take the same approach as far as SOEs are concerned, that there's an inherent purpose of these public enterprises, not necessarily the deeds of all these other things. So I agree with you. That's why you would see, for instance, we are proposing a public enterprises corporate social responsibility agency, because you know actually what happens, whoever it is that is in charge of corporate affairs, these guys, you have telecom that is funding a kindergarten in Okalongo. Then you have MVA that is also funding the same kindergarten in Okalongo. So whoever it is that can sell their product very well to these SOEs. So there's over concentration of funding by these SOEs to the same sector. And the corrupt elements within those SOEs also funds projects and programs where their relatives are. So our intervention was also to say that no, we actually need to have an agency that is where the public can submit their request, not where I meet at the Shebeen and say, can you guys sponsor? And all of a sudden you just see a person who say, no, we are not funding that thing anymore. That's why you will just see that if I have an NGO or I have a foundation and I'm the wife or the friend to the president, you see everyone is running there. I organize a dinner, all the public enterprises are coming there and funding this other person. But are you the only foundation that is doing all those things? So our reform, one of the interventions that we're saying that, okay, fine, SOE, you can still have your own intervention. Maybe you are a health professional council of Namibia, you are interested in health, but 40% of your budget must come to this agency. Then the agency put up a national priorities and everybody can go and apply there. Because on what basis? Who checks actually what these guys are funding? So those are part of the reform that we want to do. You could see that these are strategic intervention to ensure that there's transparency, there's equity, there's equality in terms of those other things. One of the things that we are also doing in the reform of public enterprises is to say that, look, we'll never, remember the housing backlog is about 300,000. I actually believe it's 500,000. So the housing backlog, what does it mean? When we're talking about the housing backlog, these are people who have actively applied for houses, and they are sitting in those institutions, they are sitting in those municipalities having applied actively. That's what we mean by housing backlog. So there are other people who are in need of housing but haven't applied. So I'm convinced, and we are convinced at the AR movement, that you can never solve the housing problem in the current setting. That's why we are proposing NHE must be relocated from its current portfolio and brought to the level of presidency. There must be a minister in the presidency responsible for housing. The other thing that we're also doing, we are also saying, so NHE gets relocated to the presidency, and then it prioritizes being a housing fund. Housing finance is one of the objectives of NHE, but they don't. They failed completely to be able to do that. But there's an SOE called RCC, Road Contractors Company. But we want to transform that road contractors company to be a state construction company. So that if you need to have a decisive intervention in Katima, for instance, you want this number of houses being built in a shortest period of time, you call the CEO and say that, look, this is a government program, I need 500 houses for the soldiers because we are building up a base there. So I'm not going to do all these tendering things. You, NHE, how do we fund here? Check these soldiers and their salaries, and you go and build the houses, so that you are not caught up into this entrepreneurship and many things like that. So we are changing those SOEs and intervening them successfully to be able to do that. One of the interventions, for instance, is what is called Agricultural Support and Mechanization Agency. So since these guys took over, they've created this thing called AMTA. Yeah, AMTA, you apparently must bring your products there. But how is a farmer producing this product? So you assume that this farmer is going to do what? So AMTA and AgriBizDev and all those other things, development of businesses. But at the level of production, nothing has happened, right? So if you want Toivo, please Toivo, you must bring your grapes to Jacob in Nongwediva. Now, how did Toivo produce it? So the first thing that we needed to be able to do, and what this government did not do, is to support the farmers practically. To support production and mechanization, to be able to put the machineries in there. So you just get resettled, and by assumption, you are going to produce and you are going to do to bring those products there. So this agency, Agricultural Mechanization Agency, also be able to do that. Those are some of the institutions to reform public sector institution where it works. We are, for instance, also saying, and nobody is talking about this thing, this intelligence that we have here. All they do is just to monitor Job's phone calls and these so-called imaginary enemies of the regime. So they have the intelligence that we have here is actually the very old exile intelligence to be able to follow people at protest. Completely useless. What we are saying is that we are saying they must create what is called economic agility and strategy unit within the intelligence. We need to be able to actually know that the Chinese are planning to come and set up an abattoir to export donkeys' meat, like how they've been doing. No one is actually checking what is basically happening. As people are tendering, we need to be able to see who's negotiating price fixing. The intelligence is completely absent. Those guys do a lot of economic pillage. They take our resources, and the intelligence is just concentrating on politics. So that's why our intervention, that there must actually be a unit there. Their sole purpose, they are checking how are these tenders happening, how are they colluding. So how come we are being policed in terms of who's our girlfriend and who's what, who's proposing the child of the president? This is all they do. So our country is not secure. So when you read that section of reform of public enterprises, because they are very important, this institution to us ideologically, yes, but purposefully, as a principle, what is it that's supposed to do? At least we know that, maybe that goes to your point, we know that there is not going to be a day where we go to bed and we wake up, Transnamif closed down. We would at least be able to know. But Ramatex, we woke up one day, those Malaysian guys are gone. Now ended up, and you see Havana, the whole of Havana and Greenwell has been created by Ramatex closure, those informal settlement, and we are left with that problem. We haven't recovered. I worked at Ramatex for 3 days. Yeah, so those guys woke up one day and they are gone. This is the essence. We need to explain that for people to be able to understand that public enterprises actually help us in terms of stability. Yeah. Private sector is very important, but these guys can pick up our bags and go. We are all comfortable with flying Namibia now. But if these guys decide that they are closing shop, what can we do? We were all excited about Air Botswana was going to come. And then we were all preparing, there's going to be 3 flights. And then we just hear, no, they haven't started. They can do those things because they are private people. So private sector, there's a role to play. Public sector is also a role to play. But we are not happy with how these institutions are concerned. All those CEOs, some of them are brilliant. Some of them have brilliant minds. Yeah. Do you know actually who uses them? We don't use them for countries' development. They are all congregating there at SWAPO in the so-called think pot that they have there. That's why we are saying in our document, all those, we will create a think tank within NIPAM. And it's compulsory for all the state-owned enterprises to be putting their brains there for the country's economic development. Because we are paying them already with public funds. Yeah. Why don't we use their intellectual capacity and capabilities? So they're just running.
This is a CEO's forum.
Yeah, well, that is in fact, that's a private initiative where they just go and meet and build their careers and see who can talk better. We're talking about a program. So if a CEO forum makes a submission, where does it go? They are just lobbying for whatever it is that they are doing. So they're brilliant ideas. For instance, they were saying they need to help and see how they can assist. They keep changing leadership after every year, I think. Yeah. We are saying NDP, for example, NDP 5. At the end of that period, government realizes that they have only achieved 58% of the NDP 5. Yeah. But I'm sure if we have a government think tank inside, for them to do their own review, debate there. Yeah. CEO, some of those CEO calls me and said, I'm in the SWAPO think tank, I'm a comrade, but we think you are the only one who can do this thing. This is how they are stealing. This is what they are doing. So why are those CEOs? They don't have platforms. That's why they come to some of us. Yeah. I actually believe that, what if I die? They have confidence in me, they give me this information, and many of them can be manager or PAs to all these other guys, but create a platform for them to contribute. It's their country. Yeah. Those problems are the problem that are facing their country. They could make a contribution. So that is our agenda as far as public sectors are concerned. And we think it can make a significant difference for economic development.
Yeah. I think in the interest of time, we might just carry on. I cannot take a break now, but you are known for certain things. Your activism, apart from issues of housing and land, it has also been activism of exposing corruption, just like you alluded to people leaking some information to you because they think that you are very active in that space. How are you going to deal with corruption as president, or even if you don't win the presidency in the end, and you are represented in parliament, having had running battles with ACC just a year ago and on many other occasions, how are you going to tackle that? Not only in terms of the approach to specific incidents of corruption, but also in terms of structural, because there seems to be structural issues there. People saying, the the Director General of the ACC still has to be, the appointment has to be ticked off by the head of state. So you are essentially resorting under the head of state, who is the head of a political party. In our country, the ruling party gets accused of a lot of corruption. That's why perhaps Mr. Noah, for example, found that SWAPO, as far as fish rot is concerned, SWAPO was as clean as an egg. The symbiotic relationship is troubling.
Yeah, so the certain concession that I make, because I'm very principled as far as I'm concerned. That's why when I was a mayor, for instance, people were saying, yeah, you must go to those people that are demonstrating. I said, no, let people demonstrate. I'm never going to close space because I'm now the president. I actually believe that we need to have a lot of young men and women who are taking up these issues. But there are two interventions that are going to have happened. And we also indicated in the plan for Namibia. You see, there are problems that are inherently NOAA's problems, but there are problems that are structural. The ACC, the Anti-Corruption Commission, I don't know what these guys were thinking. It is the only commission in Namibia, even on the face of the earth, that has no commissioners. What is a commission without the commissioners? Why did they call it? They would have even just said directorate, and it would make sense. The directorate is headed by a director general. Yeah. So one of the first things that we're going to do is that to put up a structure of commissioners there, kind of a board of directors chosen against a set criteria. And this is what has happened in other countries. Part of the problem is that, look, investigator, the director general plays two roles as far as investigations are concerned. Now, when you report corruption and the file is opened, the ACC director takes a decision whether there is probable cause or probable need for investigation. And most people don't know that. You report corruption and it can be killed there by the director general. You just say that there's no basis of investigating. Preliminary or full-scale investigation, they have a role to play there. Now, say you are lucky and then they permit preliminary investigation. You can investigate for 2 years or what, and the result comes. One person and one person only can decide that there's no case here. This guy who was doing the investigation, who have gathered all evidence, have no role to play. The prosecutor general can also not say that, no, bring that file, I need to be able to see it. So those discretional powers, that's what we need to be able to come and say. So NOAA, or in fact, we shouldn't use the name NOAA, Director General should be able to take his recommendation to the commission. And then the commissioner will be able to see whether they endorse or don't endorse. But in other countries, even within the ACC itself, in other countries, you would see some sort of the executives would be the one to decide, not just one person. So we are having problems with these discretionary powers. Those are the first thing that we're also going to do. Change, put up a layer there of commissioners so that at least we have a commission with commissioners so that it can make sense. But also deal with those discretionary powers that are involved in the investigation. You can't do that. At the level of, look at how the police does it. The police can do their own investigation based on the reports, and then the PG doesn't get involved whether investigate here or investigate there. So that's the investigators ought to investigate. So we need to insulate that process, because basically an individual is already aware. That's why you had these problems where the director general would come to your show and already make pronouncement and release a statement without an investigation, that it looks like it's an innocent thing. To an extent that in this country, the Director General have even created a term, and I actually call it the NOAA's term. That term is called administrative corruption. So he says it himself that, no, that's just an administrative corruption. And to his credit, he basically argues and said, no, that administrative corruption is what within the purview of an ED. So in the irregular conduct can okay, but apparently it doesn't constitute a corrupt conduct. But once you call it corruption, whether it's administrative or whatsoever, and we need to be able to deal with that. Those are the discretionary powers, the superstructures up there to deal with the work of the DG. But maybe let's resolve this question also that NOAA have thrown, that there's such a thing as administrative corruption that must be dealt with administratively. So we will have to do that. But of course, you're asking specifically, is President Amupanda going to appoint the Director General of the ACC? So that's one of the questions that we needed to also be able to come and check to what extent. So I'm not, if they are sanitizing bodies, that at least, because when you have in consultation, there's legal terms that I've learned, in consultation. My wife is a lawyer. In consultation or after consultation. In consultation means when you take that decision, you must take that decision with Toivo. Toivo must be in agreement, in congruence. After consultation basically means you can consult, but you say, okay, I've consulted, but I thought by myself. So there is no harm when a transparent process have taken place and they have made a recommendation, and this recommendation that among these people, they are all appointable. This is what we also have with CEOs, for instance. These are all people who are appointable. So in other words, any of those ones have met the minimum criteria. But where you have had, for example, where GainCorp just gave recommendation to Parliament, no interviews, no advert to say that these are the people who must be appointed. I would want to stay away from that. I would want to stay away from institution of trust and credibility, institution that's supposed to enforce fairness, where all of us are supposed to be subjected to. I would think that the president should ideally stay away from those institutions.
Okay. We are running out of time, but there's one important aspect that I want us to touch on quickly before we are chased out of the studio. There are things that have happened in our country that pain me a lot as an ordinary citizen. The level of poverty, for example, because we were on a trajectory of really clearing these things up. And now you get a sense that we are regressing. There are more people begging at the traffic lights, people selling lollipops in the middle of the road. These things did not exist 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So that is, to me, an indication of a country in reverse gear. And we have, because these things are just happening gradually, we don't really pick them up, because there was one guy at the robots today, and when there are 3 next week, you don't really notice, because it just happens gradually. And therefore society seems to have passively accepted the state of affairs. And that worries me a lot. So it's that, and things that are wrong that we just allow, let it pass. When we were, some of us who were debating the issue of President Nangolo Mbumba, whether he's substantive or acting, because I'm saying that if you are saying that he's substantive, then you are saying the Constitution does not make provision whatsoever for an acting president. That anybody who goes into that position under whatever circumstances is already substantive. Then people are saying, oh, but why does it even matter? What does it take away from you if the man is substantive or acting? And I'm saying, for example, that there are benefits that comes with being a substantive president that me and you as taxpayers are paying. And we just want the same things that are happening in Swabo. 90 days after the death of the president, a Congress is supposed to take place, but you're told, no, people are just playing around with things. And society gradually accepts these things. And I fear that the end result of this kind of behavior will actually be very, very bad for our country. So how do you, in not so many words, going to deal with things like poverty, eradication, and stuff like that?
Yeah, so 2 things. I mean, Sam Nujoma used to always say in his speeches, you will always find he said poverty, disease, and ignorance. Yeah. And why would you have things like that? Poverty and disease has to do with the health and socio-economic, but ignorance has to do with the mind. And we have never actually dissected what is it that let's pack it there, we'll come back. Now, as far as that is concerned, is that we are a nation in a state of confusion, right? So when we were growing up, even an unemployed person would have a job. So that our country, our government in the first 15 years actually understood that you need to deal with the problem of unskilled labor. Yeah. So in other words, with the passage of time, this government start concentrating on their understanding and conceptualization of employment or unemployment situation is about people with qualification, go to school and study. But government also tells us that every year 10,000 kids drop out of school. So in 5 years, those are 50,000 people. Those are people who enrolled, not the one that have not enrolled. The one that have enrolled, 10,000 of them drop out of school. After the COVID-19 lockdown, 30,000 kids did not return to school. What have actually happened there and then? So we need to be able to understand that you have employment, and when you create jobs, you are creating jobs for people who are employable. But there are also people who are unemployable. So the government in the first 15 years understood. That's why it was a opombera, where you just go and spade mosquitoes and they just give you some sort of public work programs there to be able to contain that. So we are dealing with a double problem now. The unemployed graduate who's in the street and hanging and chilling with these other ones that is also not employable. So no matter the amount of jobs that you create, because you have not dealt with the problem of unskilled labor. So that leadership, I'm actually convinced that our leaders, even when you just engage with them, I don't think they have an idea what is going on. They basically don't have an idea of what is going on. Yeah. That's why you need to have a serious look at what is happening to our economy. Why are people coming to the cities? You know, we used to have 60% people in rural areas and 40% in urban areas. So now that thing has changed like this. It's almost now at 50-50. And in 5 years' time, I'm convinced it's going to be like that. And we're going to have a serious crisis. And if this politics continues where we just can manipulate election and do all these things and nothing ever change, because the churches are now in charge of political parties, the churches are controlling presidential candidates and all those things, we are going to have a problem. I'm equally as concerned. Yeah. So sometimes I went to Evelyn Street the other day and we were just chilling there with the guys and I started walking and these 4 boys came. I always tell people these stories. So these 3 boys came to me and said, hey, where's your phone? And I was looking at them and one of them was, hey, Fenyong man. So one of them recognized me, but they were going to rob me. And he told others to stop from doing all those things. And then that boy started speaking to me, "Me bro, no Ali, this thing we're just trying to survive." You know, we have actually turned our people into predators and scavengers, is the term that the journalists sometimes call. So it's a problem because the leadership, there's a mismatch between the leadership in terms of what is it that we're supposed to do. You just needed to do massive public work. We have no choice. Yeah. So those programs of railway line and mobilizing people to do all those things, it wasn't just about patriotism. People think it's just about patriotism. Massive intake into the National Youth Service under Nyoma's government. It wasn't just for the purpose of teaching them about patriotism. No, it's to be able to intervene and solve those problems. This government is not an interventionist state. And that's one of our problems that we are facing. And it needs a serious intervention to be able to do that. Now, these things of people having accepted those things is a serious problem that we have. Even just now, this thing that we're dealing with, the ballots. You see, when they decided that Mbuba is a president or whatever, they say when it's less than 12 months before the next election. You know what actually happened in this country? Election date was not declared. How did they determine that it's less than 12 months? At that moment, by February, how did they determine that the election were going to take place in November? Election would have taken place in December. It's well and fine. It can still take place in December. So it's definitely, this guy was made a president unlawfully. I'm convinced about that. But you needed to have a society of zombies because zombies will not be able to question. That's why for us, we actually believe in building up this consciousness about it. Because if you don't build the necessary consciousness, we have a serious matter and people, there was a protest of PDM, very good, they did very well. But it is not about you winning the hearts because of this problem. All of us actually needed to be alarmed and say, man, if ECN is not having a secret meeting with SWAPO at State House, then this and that is basically happening, you know? So all these problems that we're actually having, and it speaks to the consciousness and the ignorance that we'll have. But one day, these poor will be left with nothing but the rich to eat. And all of us, because remember once people always saying, yeah, why are you speaking with anger and agency? Because when I speak like this, those ones who are angry, who wants to take out a knife, actually believe, oh, I don't need to take out a knife because at least Job is speaking for us. But the day they discover that Job is silenced or the system is no longer dealing with accepting Job to articulate for us, they are going to take out their knife and being able to deal with us. So unfortunately, we no longer have leaders. I was giving an example and saying in Katima, and also speaking, I spoke to one of a person that I considered as my friend in SWAPO. And then we agreed that you will not understand because you think is this a campaign. Now I was asking him, Chief, so the cheapest platform that you have in Namibia now is a SWAPO podium. Everyone can just, you SMS the SG, I want to surrender and give myself to SWAPO. Ne? And then you just get an opportunity to speak. A liberation movement. So the level of ignorance and the quality of politics, we used to have men that we would be looking up to. Even Gainkop, I have fundamental disagreement, but at least he would come there as a leader. It wasn't this as cheap. Not just SWAPO, but also other political parties. They think you must parade membership card. No, we have gotten Toivo. We have gotten what. It's no longer about how do we liberate our country. Those things that you are talking about are quite very serious because the quality of politics is poor. Yeah. Now it's all just about loud noise. It's the songs and the dancing, and people must all be standing. Yes, must all be standing, and so that you can take a photo and say, "Oh, elections are already over." How can the election be over at the rally?
Absolutely.
So we need to carefully think about these things. Otherwise, it will be a problem.
Oh, Doc, thank you. I will talk again as elections draw closer. Hopefully, we'll be able to get to speak to you again. Thank you for coming.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, that is Professor Job Amupanda. He is a leader and activist in chief of the Affirmative Repositioning movement, articulating some of the policy approaches that his movement intends to implement once elected into office on the 27th of November. Thank you for watching.